Hey everybody, welcome to my shop, Papa's Fix the Shop. This is Kim here. This is going to be another issue of the Chingaderas and Jesus clips. I was really busy all week with a bunch of little stuff, so I've just mashed it all together into a video. Bunch of quick stuff. I mean, there's a bed frame that got broken. Yeah. You gotta wonder why people fall through the bed frame onto the floor. Frisky. And let's see what else I got. The bed frame. I got some exhaust pipes I had to cut and weld back together for a guy. I have a differential that had to have the spring mounts flipped to the other side. And then I've got this big Dayton belt sander. It's a 9-inch belt and a 6-inch circular disc. I found this thing in a junkyard. It was ready to go into scrap, and I got it for nothing. And I was going to do a video on restoring it, but it turns out I took it apart and everything fell apart. No conflicts there, no challenges, and all it really needed was 4 bearings. And let's see, I bought a belt, 4 bearings, and a switch, and put everything back together. Oh yeah, I bought belts and discs too, but this thing is amazing, but I didn't really have a lot of challenges, so I just took it apart and fixed it, put it back together. I think there's one little bit where a guy he brought me a handle for a tub, you know, that you pull to make the tub go to the shower and turn it. But it's for an older lady who has a lot of arthritis and can't manipulate things, so she needed it extended from the wall so she could get a hold of it. And it was one of those cases where you got a Delta faucet and a universal handle, and they are not universal. And so I just spun off a little adapter out of a piece of brass. Quick stuff. So that's what this video is all about. A lot of little Chingaderas and Jesus clips. So, thanks for watching this week. See what comes up next week. Have a great one. What you're seeing is a bed frame from a 5th-wheel trailer, and this is a really big one that folds down from the ceiling kind of toward the rear. It's like a toy hauler, and if you got your toy out, this thing will fold down where the toy was and give you a place to sleep. Now that is 1x2 aluminum tubing. The original frame around the outside, as you can see, there's clamps in 3 positions on the top. That's where I'm welding these pieces in. And before that, the only thing in between that aluminum tubing rectangle was a piece of styrofoam, and on the top and the bottom was like paneling that was glued together. So my friend and his wife jumped up onto the bed and fell through onto the floor. Yeah. Oh man, funny stuff. So anyway, I got to stick a 60-61 2x1 tubing, but this is 1/8 inch thick, and I'm welding these 3 struts in there to make this bed more robust in case the activity on top doesn't break the bed. Yeah. This will be in Chingaderas and Jesus clips. No kidding. Okay, this is today's quick job. You know, $50 to modify 2 pieces of pipe. So this guy is building he's building a 400, I think, for an old Ford 64 Ford truck. He's lowering it. Same truck that I did the rear diff on. And so this is part of the exhaust for this V8 he's putting in this old truck. And he had these pieces of pipe bent, and as you can see, they're parallel right now. The two ends are parallel, but it wasn't, because the guy that bent it overbent this side and got it way off. You can see how much I had to take out of it to get it parallel again over here on this end. So, and I did them both. Basically, I saw it off, or cut it off with a cutoff wheel, and then I shoot the angles a little bit, keep until I get it close, and then I go out to my big sander right there, and then I dress it and dress it until it gets down to where I have just about no gap. You can see that I have used a flap disc to take the galvanized coating off of the outside, but here's the problem: it's got a heavy coat of galvanizing on the inside. And aside from the danger of sniffing gaseous zinc while you're trying to TIG this stuff, it also pollutes the weld, and it gets into the weld, and you might think it looks real good, but it's got porosity from that zinc that's infusing into the weld. And then it will have all these pinholes right there that allow the moisture in the exhaust and other corrosive byproducts from the exhaust to get up in those little tiny places and start rusting and corroding, and then it'll prematurely fail this connection. I try to do stuff as close to perfect as possible, but I have seen this stuff that looks like they weld it together with battery cables and a coat hanger, so, and it works. Anywho, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put some muriatic acid in this cup right there until I get about an inch deep. And then I'm going to hold those guys in there until they stop fizzing. And then I rinse them all off, and I'll have bare steel right around where that weld is going to be. So, yeah, just to keep my weld clean. Don't try this at home, kiddies, because sulfuric acid is not to be trifled with. It makes a lot of hydrogen gas, and you know, it can eat your skin, it can blind you. Yeah, watch out. Watch out. I'm not even going to show me doing that, because I don't want anybody copying what I do when you're dealing with toxic materials. But if you do, eye protection, gloves, good ventilation, and no open flames anywhere near it while you're doing it, because if you get a hydrogen flash in a bottle, it'll blow the acid all over you. So don't do that. Stand by. Okay, for today's adventure, I have this, I think it's Ford, looks like a Ford gearbox or differential off an old Ford truck, like an F-250 or something, or an F-150. And it's a drum brake, so it's old, 60s, early 60s. It's going to go into a 1964 Ford truck. The problem is this guy wants to lower the truck, sometimes call it slamming them. So he wants to take the springs off the top, put them underneath. That means that this thing has to be on the other side. It also means you have to be very careful. You might notice I've marked some centers, because this is, you have to get the degrees of offset correct. Basically, I'm halfway into it. So it's kind of ragged, get those off, and you get into the metal. So I'll come back and grind this all off and polish it, fill in wherever I undercut, so it looks okay. Now I got to cut this one off. Wow. It's not fun, but it's not hard either. Stay tuned. Okay, so as you can see, I've got everything cleaned up, ground, place here for my ground. I got these guys all set up, and I found the measurements from here. So it's basically moving this guy 180 degrees. Turn it over and put it 180 degrees out. So it will have the same plane as the springs had before. That's the trick. Making sure it's 180 degrees. And you can't be off by more than 1.5 degrees. Really. Theoretically. Doesn't mean it happens. Or it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. You get it off too far and it'll be obvious, but yeah. I have no idea what it looks like, where this is going anyway, so the guy told me to flip them 180. So now I weld. Okay. So as you can see in the video, I've tacked it. Both sides are tacked, and now I'm just going to weld it. Stand by. I gotta clean this tip. I just picked it up and it's kind of cruddy. So okay, let's try this again. First I get my measuring stuff off here so I don't get sprayed with little dingleberries. Okay, let's try this again. I also kind of fixed the cut of the grooves and cuts that I make with the saw when I'm cutting it off. So I have to fill it in while I'm going along. Flip around the other side. Okie dokie. That's pretty much it. Ink and paint now. Okay, that's done. Quick shot with some black lacquer. Lacquer dries really fast and it's really hard, so it's really good on frame parts. There's the other one. Used to be down here, now it's up here, flipped over. Yeah. Ready to go. Okay, so I took this sucker all apart. You can see the big castings on top. There's another casting right here. It's all very rusty, but it's surface rust. And now all the smaller bits are in the basket. And like some of these, I wire brush them to get some of the loose dirt and rust off. This one's still a bit dirty, I had to clean it up. And then it'll go into the bucket of Vaporust over there for a long time, like till tomorrow maybe. And then I'll take it out and I'll start working on cleaning the big castings. Yeah. Well, okay then. So I'm working on this old Dayton 9-inch belt sander. It has a 6-inch disc on the side. So Dayton, this is real old. I mean, I can't even figure out how old it is. I couldn't read the serial number, but it is ancient compared to modern Daytons. Back in the day, in the late 50s, well, early, in the 50s, 60s, and part of the 70s, a lot of machine tools were made in Japan. And they had like partially metric, partially standard fractional stuff. So in this case, this little aluminum cast 2-inch pulley broke coming out. And then when I started looking for a new one, I realized this thing has got a 13 millimeter center for a 13 millimeter shaft with a 2-inch pulley. Could not find a pulley with a 13 millimeter bore. So what I did was I got a 5/8, and then I took that 5/8 and this is a piece of 10 thousandths shim stock, and I cut it just the right diameter or the right size to curl around in there and leave a space on the end for the key. And then I pop it in there, make sure it's centered on the keyway. And then you can just get this guy to go through there. So, and you think about it, the difference between a 5/8 and a 13 millimeter shaft is somewhere pretty close to 30 thousandths, give or take a few. So by using a 10 thousandths piece of shim stock, and you end up taking, because it's round and it adds to both sides, it ends up taking 20 thousandths. Plus, since it's not perfectly fitting in there, it's got a little bit of ripple to it, you're able to get it together and it's kind of holding it nice and snug. And when there's a key on it and the set screw set, it'll work just fine. So, that's the trick. If you can't find a 13 millimeter pulley, you can shim it out with the shim stock. There's a lot of uses for shim stock people don't realize. So yeah, so that's how I'm doing it. And then I'll be able to put this thing back together. Right now I'm waiting for a 6302 double Z bearing, which is a metric version. It's 35 millimeter by 12 millimeter by 13 millimeter. So it's 12 wide, 35 cross, outer, and the inner bore is 13. So that bearing sits right here. When I get that bearing, I'll be able to start putting it together. Funny thing is, I went to order the bearing, and I went down to Command Industrial Supply. There's a girl down there named Jill that is fantastic. And I told her, I need a 6302 double Z bearing. Well, I got 2 in stock. So I go down there, buy them, come home, open them up, and they're 6203 double Z bearings, not 6302. And I called back Jill, and I told her, hey, you know, the 6302 bearing is actually 2 6203 bearings. And she's like, amazing. He's like, oh, crap, I transposed numbers. So she's getting them out of, you know, ordering them in from out of town. I don't have to pay the shipping. If she had gotten it right the first time, I would have had to pay the shipping because they didn't have one. In any case, if anybody is trying to do stuff like this, restore equipment, where you might need cogs or pulleys or bearings or whatever, if you have a hard time finding them online, which a lot of us experience, if there's a Command Industrial Supply anywhere near your town, you can go down there and then you can get just about anything. And on top of that, they don't sell, well, you can get cheap Chinese bearings there if you want, but you can also get good ones. And this, I'm using SKF bearings. It's a pretty good bearing. So that's the deal. Here's my little 6203 double Z bearing that is supposed to be a 6302 instead of a 6203. Yep. Lots of fun. Stay tuned for the rest.